Whether you're just getting started with watercolor and are looking to learn techniques for painting landscapes and nature scenes, or maybe you're a little bit farther ahead, but you're looking to work on some fall-themed art, this one is for you. Hey everyone, and welcome to another one of my weekly art videos. I hope you're having an amazing day wherever you are in the world, and thanks so much for joining me on this one. In today's tutorial, I am taking you through my entire process for this easy watercolor fall landscape. Everything from how I create my preliminary pencil sketch to how I combine wet on wet and wet on dry techniques for a believable sensation of open space and depth. Along the way, we're gonna be practicing painting trees, more specifically trees with changing leaves or fall colors. And I'm also going to be explaining how I layer watercolor. Without much further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. To begin, I'm gonna create my pencil sketch. I'm gonna be using an HB pencil and I'm gonna keep my drawing nice and light so that I can't see my pencil work through my paint at the end. I always get started with the horizon line, which is the horizontal line that divides the land or the ground from the sky or the ocean from the sky in seascapes. Once I place the horizon line, I'm gonna go ahead and start adding in an irregular shape for my tree line in the faraway distance. These are trees that I'm gonna want very light and blurred out so that I can really convey that sense of depth. And that in combination with elements in the middle ground and foreground that are gonna be more defined and detailed and darker, I'm gonna be able to really communicate that sense of open space and depth. Aside from that, I'm also going to want some tallish plants here. And there is gonna be a path coming down from here and going down, getting larger and larger as it makes its way closer to us. Doing a little bit of correcting there. Over here, I also want a little bit of a shrub, and a few trees are gonna be coming out of these shrubs. I do have videos where I explain how to draw and paint trees. I'll make sure to link to them down below in the text section of this post in case you'd like to go and check them out. Here's one nice irregular shape for those leaves. Trying to make that asymmetrical. And then over here, I'm gonna have another tree. I'm trying to make this tree different from this one. Maybe this one is shorter. And over here, I'm gonna have the larger tree, which is gonna be closer to us. So I definitely want this tree trunk to be wider than these tree trunks over here because this one is closer to us. This branch is too long. Okay, and this tree needs its leaves. And the purpose of me sketching all this out is not necessarily to fill these shapes in like a coloring book page when I get started with my watercolor painting process. It's just for me to visualize my composition as a whole and the individual elements that I'm trying to bring in. If as I'm painting, I want to bring in extra stuff or change certain shapes or add branches or whatever the case may be, I'm gonna go ahead and do that. The purpose of this sketch is just for me to plan out my composition and visualize things loosely. Trees, dry trees can be added in. You can see how I try to keep my composition very asymmetrical. Maybe an extra shrub over here in the background for a little bit of an extra element there with maybe dry trees growing out and faint tree trunks in the faraway tree line. That's about it for my pencil sketch. I'm gonna grab my kneaded eraser and do some cleanup work, some gentle tapping to lighten my sketch even more and remove any excess graphite that might be floating around on my paper, which may muddy up my vibrant color. So let's talk about the colors that I'm gonna be bringing in. You don't have to use these exact same colors that I'm gonna be using in order to arrive at great results. You can just go with whatever you have that are most similar to mine. These are the 5 colors that I'm going to be using for this little painting. This is New Gamboge, which is a warm yellow. This is Mayan Orange, which is a warm red. This is Burnt Sienna, which is a reddish brown. This is Sap Green, which is a warm green. And this is Payne's Gray, which is a cool gray. And I'm going to be using these colors either on their own or in combination with another one of these colors to either darken it or lighten it. Over here on my palette, I'm gonna keep my warm color mixtures in this area and my cooler color mixtures in this area over here. And I can also use this extra area over here for any browns or more neutral colors, for example, for the dirt on the path, tree trunks, branches, etc. I'm gonna prepare my different color mixtures that I'm gonna be needing for the first part of this painting process, where I'm gonna be painting my first layer all throughout this piece. In this first layer, I am going for soft, diffused out, wet on wet type effects. I'm gonna be pre-wetting my entire watercolor sheet with clean water, and after I have effectively pre-wetted my watercolor sheet, I'm gonna start painting in my color. And I wanna be able to paint nice and quick because I want those soft effects. So in order to do that, I am going to set myself up for success and make sure that I have the color mixtures that I'm gonna be needing right here ready to go for me. So the colors that I'm gonna be needing are my plain New Gamboge, then I have an orange that I created by mixing together New Gamboge and Mayan Orange, and then over here I have plain Mayan Orange. My lighter color, I have my medium color, and I have my darkest color. And then over here at the bottom, I am going to create a lighter green, a medium green, and a darker green. The way I'm gonna do that is I am going to create a little puddle of sap green plus New Gamboge for my lighter green. And then my medium green is going to be plain sap green. And then my darkest green is going to be sap green plus a little bit of Payne's Gray. And then over here on this opposite side of my palette, I'm gonna be preparing some burnt sienna for the dirt road and some burnt sienna plus Payne's Gray. This is gonna give me a nice dark chocolatey brown. Just play with the ratios of your colors and your mixtures until you get the colors that you want. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and change my water because as you can see, it's very murky. I wanna make sure that I have clean water in my container for my pre-wetting process. Okay, so for my pre-wetting, I'm gonna be needing these 2 larger brushes. This is a 1-inch flat brush, and this is a size 6 mop brush. And this is just what I like doing, but you could just use one of these. I like doing my pre-wetting with the flat brush, and then I like switching to my mop brush and actually applying my color with this mop brush. I'm gonna take a little bit of water at a time from my container and use gentle, vertical and horizontal strokes to pre-wet my entire watercolor sheet with clean water. And I'm gonna take my time with this process until I arrive at a nice, even, uniform sheen all throughout my watercolor sheet. It's essential that you take your time with this process and go over everything multiple times if you don't want sections of your paper to start drying on you too fast. Remember that we are going for soft wet on wet effects for this initial layer, and if things start drying on you, you're gonna be left with sharp defined edges of different shapes. Another thing that this pre-wetting is gonna help us do, it's gonna help things stay wet for longer so that we can do a little bit more work and not have to stress too much about painting super fast. So I've arrived at a nice even sheen all throughout my sheet. I'm gonna switch to my mop brush. Make sure that it is at least damp. Remove that excess water so that I don't water down my color too much. And I'm gonna make my way from my lighter color toward my darker colors. So I'm gonna start with the plain New Gamboge, and I'm gonna place it up here. I'm gonna make my way down in a very irregular way. I'm gonna remove a little bit of this color, soften it a bit. I went in a little bit too dark, too saturated too soon. So I just went in to soften it with a clean and slightly damp brush, a little bit of water. Okay, so you can see how I'm placing less and less color as I make my way down. And then I'm gonna go ahead and take some of my orange, and I'm gonna start placing my orange in a very irregular way, and I'm gonna make sure that I have less and less color as I make my way down. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start painting the path. And for the path, I need my burnt sienna. Here's the path. I don't wanna go in too dark too fast. If I need to soften my color, I go in and absorb some excess paint with my brush. Do any lifting to reveal a little bit more of that paper. I'm gonna remove that brown from my paintbrush bristles and get started with my green before things start drying on me. Same thing with the greens. I get started with my lightest green. I'm gonna place it down here. I'm gonna make my way up, making a little bit more of my lightest green, making sure I'm taking the same yellow that I planned. Placing more of my green. I'm gonna soften some of this color on the right, doing a little bit of lifting and softening with some water in my brush. Not too much water, because when your paper is already wet and you go in with too much water, you can start creating back runs. And you get better at water control the more you paint. Now that I have my lightest green in, I'm gonna go ahead and use my plain sap green, which is my medium green. And I'm gonna start placing it here and there in a very irregular way. Not trying to cover up my lightest green areas. I'm trying to develop a range of values with my greens as well, just like I was trying to develop a range of values with my warmer colors. Going to go in with a tiny bit of my darkest green, which is sap green plus Payne's gray. And I'm just gonna place a little bit of this darkest green here and there. This is just the first layer, so I'm not trying to go too dark too fast. Okay. All right. I want to add a little bit of that hint of the farthest away trees before this middle section of my paper starts to dry, because I want those trees in the far away distance to be blurred out. So I'm gonna change to my size 14 round brush, and I'm gonna take more of my orange color mixture. And I'm gonna place a little bit of this orange color mixture right here where I had drawn this irregular tree line in the faraway distance. I was waiting for my paper to not dry, but to not be super soaking like it was in the beginning, because if I had painted in this tree line in the faraway distance when the paper was super, super wet, then there would have been a lot of movement. And even though I'm going for a soft effect, I do want to be able to see that tree line. If I had placed this paint when I had just finished pre-wetting my paper, this red-orange paint for my faraway tree line would have expanded very quickly, and I wouldn't have much of a tree line there. It would look more like the bottom of the sky, like a sunset or something. Painting in a little bit more red, more orange, so that that tree line can be a little bit more visible. So now if I want to do any lifting while this paint is still wet, I'm going to go ahead and do that with my size 14 round brush. I'm going to remove some of this paint out from my larger tree trunks and my most important trees. Doing a little bit of lifting in the path. And this is it for my first layer. I need to allow everything to dry completely. After it's dried, I'm gonna start painting in the elements in the middle ground and the foreground, and I'm gonna be painting these on dry paper. All right, so my first layer is pretty dry and I'm ready to get started with the next phase of this painting process, where I'm gonna be painting on dry paper. And what I'm gonna be doing now is I'm gonna be painting the first layer in the leaf portions of the most important trees over here in the middle ground and the foreground. And I'm also going to be painting in these shrubs or plant areas. For this, I'm going to be using my size 14 round brush, and I'm also going to have my size 3 round brush on hand for smaller shrub areas and to create any irregularity along the edges. Just like what I did with my first layer, I want to make sure that I understand what colors I'm going to be bringing in and prepare the color mixtures that I'm going to be needing for this part of the process so that I can go in and paint relatively quickly. And if I run out of my color mixtures along the way, then I can just quickly make some more. I need my yellow, my orange, and my red. And I will be adding a little bit of burnt sienna into my red as I move toward the darker values when I'm painting the leaf portions of these trees. And then over here, I once again need to create my lighter green, which is a mixture of sap green and new gamboge. I need my medium green, which is plain sap green. And then I need my darker green, which is sap green plus a little bit of Payne's gray. I do want to make sure that I have some burnt sienna ready as well, because I will be painting the first layer in the tree trunks. I'm going to start with my size 14 round brush, and it does come to a nice fine tip. I'm going to go in with my new gamboge first, and I am going to visualize the light hitting these trees from the upper left as I am starting to paint in these leaves. So, lightest area over here on the upper left, and then I start using more and more red as I make my way down opposite to the light source. Need a little bit more new gamboge added into my red. And I'm going in with my Mayan orange, placing the Mayan orange down here. Softening this color just a little. That red was a little bit too intense. Adding a little bit more orange here at the top. And I'm continuing to drop in my warm colors until I arrive at a good shape and a good range of hue and value throughout the leaves. All right, so here is where I'm going to start adding in a little bit of burnt sienna into the red to darken it even more. And I'm going to place this darkest color just in the lower portion of the leaf structure here, and here and there in the mid to upper sections where I kind of visualize groupings of leaves creating shadows on other groupings of leaves. That's it. Maybe a little bit more orange. I don't want to completely cover up the yellow sections. I definitely want some plain new gamboge sections there. I'm pretty happy with the range of values and hues in this tree. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the same work in these trees over here. Going to remove this green that is seeping into my red, because red and green are complementary colors, and if they mix together, they're gonna start muting each other down. I'm not looking for muted colors right now. So there's my orange, and then I have my Mayan orange, my red over here. Now, if you need to do any lifting, if your color started expanding too much or your darker color started eating up your lighter colors, just do a little bit of lifting with your clean and slightly damp paintbrush bristles to reveal a little bit more of that paper. Okay, so starting with my New Gamboge, and I have 2 trees over here. And remember, the light is coming from the upper left. I do have a video where I take you through drills, brushstroke drills, and I explain about going in with my orange now. In that video, I explain about the scribbling technique, the bouncing technique, and other brushstroke drills that I would highly, highly recommend working on if you're just getting started with watercolor, especially moving on to the red. That can really help you start developing better brush control so that you're able to more easily create these textures when you're actually creating fuller pieces. Adding a little bit of burnt sienna into the red for those darkest areas, burnt sienna, and adding the burnt sienna especially in the lower part of the leaf structure here. Adding more red, and just developing a good range of values in the leaves to convey those groupings of leaves blocking the light from hitting each other. And I have 1 more tree to go. It's a smaller one behind the one that I just painted in. So I'm gonna go in with my New Gamboge first. I need to be careful with this one because it's being overlapped by this one that I just painted. And I don't want to start creating a big blob that is all merged together. So I want to be careful with that one. New Gamboge first. This is my orange. And then red plus a little bit of burnt sienna. And I'm just going to place this at the bottom. Okay, that's enough. And as long as your paint is still wet, if you find things look a little bit flat and you want to drop in a little bit of a mid-tone in some areas, or if you want to do a little bit of lifting, use your clean and slightly damp bristles of your paintbrush as a little absorbent sponge to reveal a little bit more of that paper under the paint. You can go ahead and do that. What really gives your trees dimension is having lighter areas and mid-tone areas and darkest areas. And the way that you do that is you set yourself up for success by preparing the colors and color mixers that are going to allow you to do that, and visualizing the light source and where the light source is hitting these trees from. And also, of course, understanding the 3-dimensional structure of these trees is going to help you develop that range of values in a way that looks believable. But watercolor is always going to dry lighter than how it looks when it's wet. We're going to be darkening certain areas in just a bit after everything has dried. For now, I'm just going to allow that to dry. I'm going to clean out all the warm colors from my paintbrush bristles, and I'm going to go in and start painting in some of these shrubs. Starting with my lighter color first, and this is my size 14 round. Medium color. I'm going to remove all of that color from my paintbrush bristles, and I'm going to go in and soften the bottom edge here. I still see my pencil shape that I started with through my paint, by the way. If you can't see your pencil work and you need it, You can sketch it in as long as your paper is dry. A little bit of my darker green. And I'm gonna drop in a little bit of orange as well, just to help convey a little bit of changing leaves changing colors here. I'm gonna remove this paint from my paintbrush bristles again, and I'm gonna go in and soften the bottom edge. Do some bleeding over here. Another thing that I can start doing for these elements in the middle ground and background is I can start creating little leaf textures or twigs coming out of these shrubs. And for this, I change on over to my smaller brush. This is my size 3 round. And you can just do flicking motions to pull that paint that is still wet that I just painted in, to help create a little bit of a twig or plant effect. As long as your paint is still wet, you can do that. And finally, another thing that I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start painting in the first layer in the tree trunks. So here, looking at my pencil work and using that to guide me. I'm just painting in the tree trunk right now and not so much the branches, because this is still damp, and if I start painting in the branches are just gonna diffuse out, and I kind of want them sharp and defined. So here's the other tree trunk. And then over here I have a smaller dry tree. Check out my video where I explain how to paint dry trees with watercolor. I'll make sure to link to it down below. I'm gonna paint in these far away dry trees, and I want them super, super thin because they are quite farther away. I'm gonna paint in this plant shape, this little shrub over here in the foreground, and then I'm gonna make my way into the tree trunk. I'm gonna start with my size 14 round and my green color mixtures. Starting with my lighter green that has a little bit of new gamboge in it. Then I'm going to go in with my medium green and then my darkest green. A little bit of Payne's gray. All right, I'm gonna do a little bit of bleeding, removing this green from my paintbrush bristles while that paint is still wet, running my clean and damp paintbrush over that bottom edge to soften it and create a little bit of a bleeding effect. I'm gonna switch on over to my size 3 round brush while this shape is still wet, and I can do that pulling using flicking motions for that plant edge. Gonna be painting in this tree trunk in just a bit, so don't want to go overboard with that technique. I'm gonna switch on over to my size 3 round brush and my plain burnt sienna, and I'm gonna start painting in the first layer in this tree trunk. This tree trunk is way larger than the others because it's a closer tree. Not looking to paint the branches just yet, just making my way closer to the leaf portion and leaving it there. And I'm gonna paint in this dry tree over here. I'm gonna take a little bit of my orange while this is still wet. I'm just gonna drop a little bit of this in here and there. There's a little plant over here that I added in when I was creating my sketch. I'm gonna add it in because this section looks a little bit empty. Going in with my lighter green first and then my darker green. And I'm gonna do a little bit of bleeding at the bottom. Gonna add a little bit more green because I can't see it very much at all. Softening the bottom. Switching to my size 3 round brush and just creating a few tapered marks along the top. So while I allow the trees to dry completely so that I can go in and paint the branches and the final details, I'm gonna be doing a little bit more work in the path. So for this, I need to create more of my plain burnt sienna little puddle here, and also my burnt sienna plus Payne's gray mixture for that deep, dark, more chocolatey brown. I'm gonna use my size 14 round brush. And I'm just looking to define the edges of the path a little bit more and maybe darken certain sections closest to us a little bit more to enhance that depth. First, I start with the burnt sienna, plain burnt sienna, kind of a coffee consistency here. I'm just gonna darken a little in a very irregular way, especially kind of from the middle down. Remove that paint from my paintbrush bristles. Soften the edges of these shapes, which are gonna look very sharp and defined because I went in and painted on dry paper. Softening some edges, softening color a little, and going in with my darker color. Dropping it in into sections that are still wet, so that I can expand that range of values, especially in these sections of the path closer to us. Maybe go in with a little bit of burnt sienna over here in the middle section. And then I want the color to become lighter and lighter as the path recedes away from us. I'm gonna create a mixture of sap green and a little bit of burnt sienna. Drop it into the path here and there while it's still wet. Switch on over to my size 3 round brush and use the same green color mixture to add a little bit of grass along the path. I'm going to paint in grasses in this area later because everything is still very wet. Adding in a few blades of grass along the path. And just remember that when you're adding these, the blades of grass that you add closer to us as the viewer of the scene are going to be longer or larger than the blades of grass that are farther away. So wherever you want to add grass, just keep that in mind. A little bit of a darker green. All right, so I'm going into the leaves of these important trees, and I'm gonna be adding some darker value areas and also some extra detail. I need my medium color mixture, which is my orange, and I need some of my darker red, which is the Mayan orange plus burnt sienna. And I'm gonna go in with my size 14 round brush, using the orange first, which is the lighter color of the two. And I am visualizing where groupings of leaves would be creating a shadow on other groupings of leaves. Going in with my red. Just looking to expand that range of values, create some shadow shapes. Looks a little bit too stark. I'm gonna go in and soften with a clean and slightly damp brush. All right, that's all I'm gonna do on that one. Gonna do the same for this one over here, creating some darker values. Need more of my new gamboge, Mayan orange. Little shadow shapes. Not looking to cover up my first layer. I'm just looking to expand that range of values and give the tree a little bit more dimension. This one over here. Little irregular shadow shapes inside of the leaf portion of the tree. A little bit more burnt sienna. I'm gonna change to my size 3 round brush, and I'm gonna be using my new gamboge and Mayan orange color mixture to add a few little leaf effects here and there. This would be the bouncing technique, because all I am doing is going in and pressing my paintbrush bristles down to create a little bit of a tiny leaf shape. And I'm just adding these in a very irregular way, trying to stay away from organized patterns. Little teeny tiny leaves. Going in with the same technique on these other trees, clustering these teeny tiny leaf shapes together in different ways. And if you're adding these leaves over darker colors, then you can use the red, you can use the burnt sienna, you can use the orange. I think that's enough. I don't want to go overboard. And I'm going to allow this to dry so that I can go in and paint in the branches. Everything is almost completely dry, and I'm ready to get started with the very last part of this painting process, where I'm going to be adding in the branches into the leaf portions of these trees. I'm also going to be creating darker shadows on the tree trunks. Also, I'm going to be adding final darker green grasses over here in the foreground especially. I changed my water, and I am using my size 3 round brush for all of this final stuff that I'm gonna be doing. And to begin, I'm gonna be using my burnt sienna, kind of a coffee consistency, and I'm gonna go in with this small brush. You can feel free to redraw your branches if you want before going in and painting them. And I like skipping over little sections of my branches and leaving certain sections of my branch shape, if you will, unpainted, so that it can look like leaves are overlapping that branch or covering up that branch in certain areas. So now that I have the plain burnt sienna branches added in, I'm gonna start darkening some shadow sections in the tree trunk and also in the branches. Notice how I'm using upwards strokes over here at the bottom of the tree trunk, because there's supposed to be grass over here at the bottom. Just creating some shadow effects in the bottom and also beneath the leaves. Doing upwards flicking motions to pull some of this paint up. Create a little bit of a wood texture. This darker brown. I can paint in extra branches with my darker brown, or just repaint over certain sections of my lighter branches so that I can have some darker branch sections and some lighter branch sections. It's gonna help things look a little bit more natural. Lighten this a little. Gonna do the same work in my other trees, starting with my burnt sienna. Creating some branches. Switching on over to my darker brown that has the Payne's gray in it, and creating shadow shapes along the base of the tree. Upwards flicking motions helps me get a little bit of that wood texture in, and then darkening sections of my branches. Using some darker brown in my last tree as well. Upwards flicking motions along the bottom and darkening some branches. If you need to soften anything, go in with a clean and slightly damp brush. If any branches look a little bit too stark to you, maybe you went in too dark, too thick with your paint consistency, you can go in and soften with a clean and slightly damp brush. Do some gentle scrubbing and lifting with your absorbent towel. And that is it for my trees. If I continue adding more detail, I can just run the risk of losing the freshness and start overly describing things. The last thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go in with my sap green and a bit of Payne's gray, and I'm just gonna be adding in some darker grasses nearest us. If you want to add some dry grass, just add a little bit of burnt sienna into the green to desaturate it and turn it into a brownish green. Going in with a tiny bit of burnt sienna plus Payne's gray, just adding in some darker sections here along the path, especially nearest us. Almost dry brushing here to help me create a little bit of texture in the dirt. And that is it for this one. Did you enjoy this tutorial? I really hope you did, and if so, make sure to check out everything that I am offering over at my Patreon membership website, because for a very small amount a month, you're going to get immediate access to my exclusive tutorials, classes, and resources that I don't share anywhere else. All of these exclusive tutorials include my downloadable outline sketches so that you don't have to start from scratch, reference photos, and my supply lists. There's already a library of over 75 sketching and watercolor painting tutorials that are real-time, meaning they are not sped up or edited, they are fully narrated, and I take you through my entire process, making sure to explain everything as clearly as possible, step by step. 2 new exclusive full-length tutorials are added into this exclusive library every single month. For those of you who are interested in really taking your artwork to the next level and want to know all of the inside secrets that I learned about in art school and courses that I've invested in myself, there's also a full library on classes on art fundamentals in which all of the bases are covered. That library has now over 35 classes and workshops, all have assignments at the end that help you actually put your knowledge to the test. And there's a brand new class or workshop added at the beginning of every single month. As if all of this weren't enough, you also get a weekly sketchbook prompt sent to your inbox to help you stay consistent with your art practice. There's a live training, workshop, or paint along session with me every single month. Members in the $15 tier and upwards get access to thorough feedback from me on their work whenever they need it, and much, much more. There are different tiers that you can join that give you access to different things, which you can choose from depending on your goals and needs. So go ahead and check it out. I'm going to make sure to leave a link where you can find out more down below in the description box of this video. And I would love, love, love to get to know more about you and your work and have you join this innermost art community of mine.